The morning started like any other aboard the space station New Geneva, floating high above Earth in its silent orbit. Admiral Jake Morrison sipped his coffee, while reading the daily reports from patrol ships scattered throughout the solar system. The reports were boring as usual. Nothing more exciting than a few asteroids drifting off course and some routine maintenance on the outer defense platforms. Jake had been running Earth's orbital defense for 15 years now, and most days felt exactly the same. He was a tall man with gray hair and deep lines around his eyes from years of staring at computer screens and star charts. His uniform was crisp and clean, decorated with ribbons that told the story of a long military career spent preparing for threats that never seemed to come. The communication panel beeped softly, indicating an incoming transmission. Jake expected another routine update from one of the patrol ships, maybe a request for supplies or a schedule change. Instead, his communications officer, Lieutenant Amy Johnson, turned around with a confused expression on her young face. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission on all frequencies simultaneously," she said, her voice uncertain. "It's not from any of our ships or stations." Jake set down his coffee cup and walked over to her station. "What kind of transmission?" "It's in English, sir, but the grammar is strange. Like someone learned our language from old radio broadcasts." Amy's fingers moved quickly over her controls, adjusting the signal clarity. "The transmission is coming from outside our solar system, but it's incredibly strong. Whatever is sending this has serious power behind it." Jake felt a cold sensation in his stomach. For decades, Earth's military leaders had wondered when this day might come. They had prepared for it, planned for it, built entire defense networks around the possibility of it, but somehow he had never really believed it would happen during his lifetime. "Put it on the main speakers," he ordered. The bridge fell silent as Amy activated the transmission. A voice filled the room, speaking English with an odd mechanical quality and strange pauses between words. "Primitive species of third planet. You are commanded to surrender all resources and submit to Zephyrian rule. Your civilization shows signs of basic technology development, but lacks the power to resist our forces. Resistance will result in complete annihilation of your species and the destruction of your world. You have 7 of your planetary rotations to comply with this demand. Prepare your leaders for negotiations regarding your surrender terms." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in complete silence. Jake stared at the communication panel for a long moment, his mind racing through everything this meant. First contact with an alien species and they were demanding surrender. After all the years of wondering if humanity was alone in the universe, the answer had come in the form of a threat. "Amy, record that transmission and send copies to Earth Command, Mars Command, and the Titan facility immediately," Jake said, his voice steady despite the storm of thoughts in his head. "Use Priority 1 encryption." "Yes, sir," Amy replied, her fingers already working on the controls. Jake walked to the main viewing window that looked down at Earth. The blue and green planet turned slowly below him, beautiful and peaceful. Billions of people down there had no idea that their world had just received an ultimatum from an alien empire. Most of them were probably getting ready for work, drinking their morning coffee, complaining about traffic or weather. Within an hour, Jake's personal communication panel lit up with an incoming call from President Lisa Carter herself. The president looked tired, which made sense since it was still early morning in Washington, but her eyes were sharp and focused. "Admiral Morrison, I've read the transmission," she said without any greeting pleasantries. "What's your assessment of the threat level?" Jake had been thinking about this question since the moment the alien message ended. "Madam President, any species capable of sending a signal that's strong from outside our solar system clearly has advanced technology. The fact that they learned English from our broadcasts suggests they've been watching us for some time. They're confident enough to give us a deadline rather than attacking immediately, which means they believe they have overwhelming force." President Carter nodded slowly. "I'm calling an emergency session of the Global Defense Council. Every member nation needs to be informed immediately. How long until we can expect to see their ships?" "Unknown, ma'am. If they're already in our system, our long-range sensors haven't detected them yet. If they're coming from outside, it depends on their faster-than-light capabilities." "Understood, Admiral. I want you to begin implementing Protocol 7 immediately." Jake felt his heart rate increase. Protocol 7 was the contingency plan that every Earth military officer knew about, but hoped would never be activated. It had been developed decades ago when humanity first detected radio signals from deep space that suggested the existence of other intelligent species. Yes, ma'am. All defense platforms will be brought to full readiness within 6 hours. After the call ended, Jake stood alone on the bridge for a moment, thinking about everything that was about to change. The Zephyrians had made a critical error in their assessment of humanity. They saw radio broadcasts and a few space stations and assumed Earth was a primitive civilization with basic technology. They had no idea what humanity had really been building in the dark spaces between planets. Jake activated his command console and began sending coded messages to locations throughout the solar system. On Mars, hidden facilities began powering up massive weapon systems that had been disguised as mining equipment. In the asteroid belt, defense platforms that looked like simple research stations started revealing their true purpose. On the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, installations that appeared to be scientific outposts began charging energy weapons that could crack small moons. The most important message went to Dr. Helen Ross on Titan, where humanity's most advanced and secret weapons waited in underground facilities that the aliens could never detect from space. Jake looked down at Earth one more time before returning to his duties. The Zephyrians had given humanity 7 days to surrender. Jake suspected that 7 hours would be more than enough time to end this war before it truly began. The alien empire was about to learn that appearances could be very deceiving, and that the primitive species of the third planet had been preparing for this moment much longer than anyone could imagine. Captain Ryan Davis had been watching the alien fleet for 3 days from his position at the edge of the solar system. His ship, the Horizon's Edge, was completely invisible to the Zephyrian sensors thanks to advanced cloaking, technology that bent light and energy around the hull like water, flowing around a stone. The alien ships were beautiful in their own way, Ryan had to admit. Each vessel looked like it had been carved from a single massive crystal, their surfaces reflecting starlight in rainbow patterns that shifted and changed as they moved. There were 300 ships arranged in a perfect formation that stretched across several 1,000 kilometers of space. They really know how to make an entrance, said Lieutenant Amy Johnson from her position at the tactical station. She was young, maybe 25, with short brown hair and the kind of sharp intelligence that made her perfect for reconnaissance work. Too bad they picked the wrong solar system to threaten. Ryan nodded while studying the detailed scans his ship was collecting. The Zephyrian vessels were impressive, but they were also predictable. Their formation followed classical military patterns that suggested a species that had never faced serious resistance. Every ship was positioned exactly where Ryan expected it to be, based on their apparent tactical doctrine. Any signs they've detected us? Ryan asked his sensor operator, Petty Officer Carl Wright. Negative, sir. Their scanning patterns are pretty basic. They seem to be focused on the inner planets and completely ignoring the outer system. Carl was an older man who had been working with stealth technology for more than 20 years. They have no idea we're out here. Back on Earth, the response to the alien ultimatum was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, though the Zephyrians had no way of knowing that yet. President Lisa Carter sat in the Emergency Command Center beneath the White House, surrounded by military leaders and scientists who had been planning for this exact situation for decades. General Frank Hughes stood before a massive display screen that showed the positions of every human asset in the solar system. What had looked like a modest collection of space stations and research facilities just hours before was now revealing itself to be something completely different. Orbital Platform Alpha is online and ready, reported Colonel Susan Blake from her position aboard what the aliens probably thought was just another space station. In reality, Platform Alpha was a weapon system capable of destroying entire fleets. All primary batteries are charged and targeting systems are active. Similar reports came in from dozens of other locations. Mining facilities in the asteroid belt shed their disguises to reveal massive railgun installations. Cargo ships that had been moving peacefully between planets suddenly deployed weapon systems that had been hidden in their hulls. Research stations on the moons of Jupiter and Saturn activated defensive shields and began extending weapon arrays. Dr. Helen Ross watched the preparation from her command center deep beneath the surface of Titan. Around her, hundreds of technicians worked at control stations that managed the most advanced weapons humanity had ever built. The Titan array was a weapon system so powerful that it had been built in absolute secrecy. known only to the highest levels of government and military command. Capacitor banks are at 60% and climbing, reported her chief engineer, Dr. Mark Thompson. We'll be ready to fire within 4 hours. Helen nodded while checking the energy readings on her displays. The Titan array drew power directly from Saturn's magnetic field, using technology that was decades ahead of anything most human scientists thought possible. When fired, it could disable every electronic system in the solar system with surgical precision, affecting only the targets it was programmed to hit. Meanwhile, Captain Davis received new orders through the quantum communication system that linked all human military units. He was to maintain his observation position and continue gathering intelligence on the alien fleet. But he was also authorized to begin revealing human capabilities if the situation required it. Amy, bring the escort online, Ryan ordered. Amy's fingers moved quickly over her controls, and suddenly 12 additional ships appeared around the horizon's edge as their cloaking systems deactivated. The escort vessels had been following Ryan's ship for days, completely undetected even by human sensors. Each one was a state-of-the-art warship designed specifically for fighting enemies with advanced technology. The Zephyrian fleet continued its slow approach toward Earth, apparently unaware that they were being watched by dozens of human ships positioned throughout the solar system. Their communications were being monitored and decoded by human computers that had been analyzing alien languages for years based on captured signals from across the galaxy. Emperor Kethavar sat on his crystal throne aboard the flagship, confident that the primitive humans would surrender long before his fleet reached their planet. His military advisors had assured him that Earth showed no signs of advanced defensive capabilities. A few orbital platforms and some basic spacecraft were no match for the might of the Zephyrian Empire. How much longer until we reach the optimal firing position? The Emperor asked his fleet commander, Admiral Zethmar. Approximately 18 of their hours, Your Excellency. The humans have made no move to prepare defenses or evacuate their planet. They appear to be completely helpless. The Emperor felt a surge of satisfaction. Another easy conquest to add to his empire's long list of victories. Soon he would control the resources of this solar system, and its billions of human slaves would serve the greater glory of the Zephyrian people. But in the depths of space, human preparations continued at a pace that would have shocked the alien invaders if they had known about it. Ships that had been hidden for decades began moving into position. Weapon systems that existed only in the deepest classified files started coming online. Communication networks that operated on principles the Zephyrians didn't understand began coordinating. A response that would end the war before it truly began. President Carter stood before the Global Defense Council. Representatives from every nation on Earth gathered in person or through secure video links. The decision that would determine humanity's future was about to be made. The alien fleet will be in range to attack Earth in less than 20 hours, she announced. All our defensive systems are ready. The question now is not whether we can defend ourselves, but how we choose to respond to this threat. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would not surrender, and the Zephyrian Empire was about to learn that some species were much more dangerous than they appeared. Emperor Kethavar felt completely confident as his fleet approached the inner solar system. His crystal ships moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the reflected light of the human sun. For over 200 years, the Zephyrian Empire had conquered world after world, and never once had they encountered a species capable of meaningful resistance. The Emperor stood on the bridge of his flagship, a massive vessel that was larger than most human cities. Around him, his officers worked at control stations made from the same crystal material as the ship itself. Everything about Zephyrian technology was based on their ability to grow and shape these special crystals that could store vast amounts of energy and information. Your Excellency, we are receiving a transmission from the human planet, announced Communications Officer Veltar, his crystalline features reflecting the blue light from his control panel. Already begging for mercy? The Emperor asked with amusement. Put them on the main display. The transmission came from a human ship that appeared on their sensors as it approached the Zephyrian fleet. It was a simple vessel, nothing more than a basic transport craft that looked like it had been hastily converted for diplomatic use. The Emperor was almost insulted that the humans would send such a primitive ship to negotiate their surrender. Commander Eric Thompson sat in the captain's chair of the diplomatic vessel Unity, wearing his dress uniform and trying to project an image of calm professionalism. He was a career diplomat who had spent the last 10 years preparing for exactly this situation, studying alien cultures and learning how to communicate with species that might view humanity as inferior. "This is Commander Thompson of the United Earth Diplomatic Corps," he transmitted to the alien fleet. "We request permission to meet with your leadership to discuss the current situation." Emperor HFY was surprised by the formal tone of the humans' message. Most species at this point were either attacking in desperation or crying for mercy. The humans seemed to be treating this as if it were a normal diplomatic encounter between equals. "You may approach our flagship, human," the Emperor replied, "but know that we are here to accept your surrender, not to negotiate." Eric smiled slightly as he received the alien response. The Zephyrians were about to get their first real surprise of this war. "Deploy the escort," Eric ordered his tactical officer. Suddenly, 12 warships appeared around the Unity, as their cloaking systems deactivated simultaneously. The human ships materialized from what had appeared to be empty space, their hulls black and angular in design that was completely different from anything the Zephyrians had seen before. On the alien flagship, alarm sounds began echoing through the crystal corridors as sensor operators scrambled to understand what they were seeing. "Where did those ships come from?" Admiral Zethmar demanded, his voice high with confusion and growing fear. "Unknown, sir," replied the chief sensor operator. "They simply appeared from nowhere. Our sensors detected no approach signatures, no energy emissions, nothing at all until they revealed themselves." Emperor HFY stared at the tactical display showing the human ships. Each vessel was roughly the same size as a Zephyrian cruiser, but their energy signatures were unlike anything in the Empire's databases. The technology required to hide ships so completely from Zephyrian sensors was supposed to be impossible. "How advanced is their cloaking technology?" the Emperor asked his science officer. "Based on these readings, Your Excellency, it operates on principles we do not understand. Our best theories suggest they are manipulating space-time itself to bend sensor waves around their hulls." The Emperor felt the first real doubt he had experienced in decades of conquest. Space-time manipulation was technology that even the Zephyrian Empire had only theorized about. If the humans possessed such capabilities, what else might they be hiding? Eric Thompson's voice came over the communication channel again, still calm and professional. "Your Excellency, we appreciate your interest in our solar system. However, we must inform you that your presence here constitutes a violation of Terran space. We are prepared to escort your fleet beyond our borders with no further incident." The casual way the humans spoke about escorting a fleet of 300 warships struck the Emperor as either incredibly brave or completely insane. Zethmar leaned close to his leader's throne. "Your Excellency, perhaps we should consider the human offer. If they possess cloaking technology this advanced, they may have other capabilities we are unaware of." Emperor HFY's pride flared at the suggestion of retreat. The Zephyrian Empire did not negotiate with primitives, and it certainly did not flee from them. "You dare suggest terms to the Zephyrian Empire?" the Emperor transmitted back to the human ship. "We have conquered 17 star systems and subjugated dozens of species across this galaxy. Your world will fall just like all the others." Eric had been expecting this response. Every briefing he had received about the Zephyrian Empire indicated they were driven by pride and a belief in their own superiority. That pride was about to become their greatest weakness. "Yes, Your Excellency, we know about your conquests," Eric replied quietly. "We have been watching your empire for quite some time. We know about the destruction of the Kelleran homeworld. We know about the slave camps on Vorthak Prime. We know about the mining operations that stripped 12 planets bare of all resources." The silence from the alien fleet was absolute. Every Zephyrian officer on every ship was staring at their communication systems in shock. The Kelleran campaign had happened over 50 years ago, in a completely different part of the galaxy. Vorthak Prime was a secret facility that was not marked on any star charts. The mining operations were classified at the highest levels of the Empire. "How do you know about our classified operations?" Admiral Zethmar asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Eric's response sent ice through the veins of every alien who heard it. "We told you, Admiral. We have been watching for a very long time." Emperor HFY realized with growing horror that everything about this situation was wrong. The humans were not the primitive species his scouts had reported. They possessed advanced cloaking technology. They had intelligence networks that spanned the galaxy, and they were speaking to his fleet as if they held all the advantages. "What are you?" the Emperor asked, his voice losing all its earlier confidence. "We are the species you made a very serious mistake in threatening," Eric answered, "and now you are going to learn exactly how serious that mistake was." The war began at exactly 1400 hours Earth time, when Emperor Kethavar made the worst decision in Zephyrian history. His pride wounded by the humans' casual dismissal of his empire's power, he gave the order that would doom his fleet. "All ships, open fire on the human diplomatic vessel," the Emperor commanded, his voice shaking with rage. "Show these primitives the true might of the Zephyrian Empire." The response was immediate. 300 crystal ships turned their weapons toward the small human diplomatic vessel Unity and fired simultaneously. Beams of concentrated energy that could melt through solid metal struck the human ship from every direction, creating a brilliant display of light that could be seen across the solar system. When the light faded, the Unity hung in space completely undamaged. Its shields had absorbed the entire attack without even flickering. Commander Eric Thompson's voice came over the communication channel, still calm and professional, despite having just survived an attack that should have vaporized his ship. "We'll take that as a rejection of our peaceful offer." Emperor Kethavar stared at his tactical display in complete disbelief. The combined firepower of his entire fleet had struck a single human ship and accomplished absolutely nothing. The Unity's energy readings showed that its defensive systems had barely registered the attack. "How is that possible?" Admiral Zethmar whispered. The answer came in the form of Captain Susan Blake's voice echoing across every Zephyrian ship in the fleet. Her transmission was broadcast on frequencies that the aliens had thought were secure, proving that human technology could penetrate their most advanced communication systems. "This is Captain Blake of the Earth Defense Force battleship Defiant," she announced. "You have just committed an act of war against the Terran Republic. Surrender immediately or face the consequences." A new ship appeared on the Zephyrian sensors, massive beyond anything they had ever encountered. The Defiant was over 3 kilometers long and bristled with weapon systems that made the aliens' crystal technology look like children's toys. It had been hiding behind one of the larger asteroids, completely invisible until it chose to reveal itself. "Impossible," the Emperor breathed. "Our sensors detected no ship of that size." Captain Blake's ship was just the beginning. Across the solar system, humanity's true military strength began to reveal itself. Ships emerged from hidden bases on asteroids, from beneath the surfaces of moons, from orbital positions that had been perfectly camouflaged. What the Zephyrians had thought was a sparsely defended star system was actually home to one of the most advanced military forces in the galaxy. Admiral Jake Morrison coordinated the defense from his command station, watching as reports flooded in from every corner of the solar system. "Mars Command reports all batteries online. Jupiter Station confirms readiness. Titan Array is fully charged and ready to fire." The Zephyrian fleet found itself surrounded by human ships that had appeared from nowhere. Every alien vessel was targeted by multiple weapon systems, and their own sensors could barely track the movements of the human vessels that seemed to phase in and out of visible space at will. Emperor Kethavar realized too late that he had led his fleet into a trap. The humans had not just been prepared for this attack, they had been hoping for it. Every ship position, every formation pattern, every tactical doctrine the Zephyrians used had been studied and planned for. "All ships, retreat to jump distance," the Emperor ordered, his voice cracking with panic. "Jump drives are not responding." "Your Excellency," reported his navigation officer, "something is interfering with our faster-than-light systems." Dr. Helen Ross smiled as she watched the readings from her control station deep beneath Titan's surface. The interference was coming from the Titan Array, a weapon system that could manipulate space-time across an entire star system. The Zephyrian ships were trapped, unable to escape while the array was active. "Beginning selective targeting sequence," Dr. Ross announced to her team. "Disable their weapons first, then their engines. Minimal casualties." The Titan Array fired, though the Zephyrians never saw the beam that struck them. It was invisible to conventional sensors, operating on principles that existed at the very edge of physics. The beam touched each alien ship simultaneously, finding their weapon systems with surgical precision. In less than 10 seconds, every gun, missile launcher, and energy cannon in the Zephyrian fleet simply stopped working. The crystalline technology that powered their weapons found itself unable to store or channel energy properly, as if the basic laws of physics had changed around them. Weapons are offline across the entire fleet, Admiral Zethmar reported, his voice hollow with defeat. Engineering reports that the crystal matrices have been somehow altered at the molecular level. Captain Blake's ship moved closer to the alien flagship, its massive bulk dwarfing even the Emperor's crystal palace. This is your final warning. Surrender now or we will disable your life support systems. Emperor Kethavar looked around his bridge at officers who had conquered star systems and destroyed entire civilizations. Now they sat helpless before a species they had dismissed as primitive just hours before. The Emperor realized that everything his empire believed about warfare and technology had been proven wrong in the span of minutes. "We surrender," he transmitted, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. Lieutenant Colonel Paul Wright led the boarding team that secured the Zephyrian flagship. He found the Emperor in his command chamber, slumped on his crystal throne like a broken statue. The once proud ruler who had terrorized 17 star systems was reduced to staring at the floor in shock. "Your Excellency," Paul said formally, "you and your fleet are now prisoners of the Terran Republic. You will be treated according to the laws of war and given the opportunity to face justice for your crimes against the peoples of this galaxy." The Emperor looked up at the human soldier with eyes that reflected his complete defeat. "How long have you been preparing for this?" "Since we first detected your Empire's radio transmissions 80 years ago," Paul replied. "We knew that eventually someone would try to conquer Earth. We decided to make sure that when it happened, the war would be very short." Emperor Kethavar closed his eyes and tried to understand how his empire's greatest conquest had become its most complete defeat. The humans had not just won the battle, they had made it look effortless. 43 minutes from the first shot to total surrender, and the entire Zephyrian fleet had been captured without a single human casualty. The war was over, and the galaxy was about to learn that Earth was not the primitive world it appeared to be. 3 months after the shortest war in galactic history, former Emperor Kethavar stood in the United Nations Assembly Hall on Earth, his crystal form catching the light from the great windows that looked out over New York City. He wore simple clothes instead of his imperial robes, and his once proud bearing had been replaced by something that looked almost like humility. The assembly hall was packed with representatives from dozens of worlds, many appearing through quantum communication links that connected planets across the galaxy. These were the former subjects of the Zephyrian Empire, species that had lived under alien rule for generations and were now experiencing freedom for the first time in living memory. President Lisa Carter stepped up to the podium, her voice carrying clearly through the hall and across the galaxy through the communication network. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes, but everyone present knew that she commanded the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen. "Ladies, gentlemen, and representatives of all species present," she began, "today we gather to discuss the future of our galaxy. For too long, powerful empires have used their strength to dominate and enslave others. Today, that era comes to an end." Former Emperor Kethavar listened to the human leader's words and felt something he had never experienced before in his long life: shame. For 2 centuries, he had believed that strength gave him the right to rule over others. Now he understood that true strength meant protecting those who could not protect themselves. Dr. Helen Ross stood at a display, screen showing technical diagrams that would have been impossible to understand just months before. She explained how humanity had developed technologies that seemed like magic to most species in the galaxy. "For 200 years we knew we were not alone," she said to the assembled representatives. "We detected radio signals from across the galaxy that told us of wars, conquests, and suffering on a scale we could barely imagine. So we prepared ourselves, not to conquer others but to ensure that no species could threaten us or our neighbors." The technical achievements she described left many of the alien representatives speechless. Faster-than-light communication that could connect planets instantly across vast distances, energy systems that could tap directly into the power of stars, weapons that could disable entire fleets without harming a single living being. All of this had been developed in secret, while the rest of the galaxy thought Earth was just another primitive world. Admiral Ryan Davis, promoted after his successful reconnaissance mission, outlined humanity's new role in galactic affairs. He stood at a podium wearing his dress uniform, his young face serious as he addressed leaders from across the galaxy. "Earth will not become an empire like the Zephyrians," he announced. "We have no interest in ruling over other species or taking their resources. Instead, we offer our protection to any world that faces threats from aggressive neighbors. No longer will small planets live in fear of conquest." The response from the freed worlds was immediate and overwhelming. Representatives stood and applauded, many with tears in their eyes as they realized that the age of galactic tyranny was truly ending. Species that had been enslaved for generations were suddenly free to govern themselves, to trade with their neighbors, to live without fear. Captain Susan Blake presented the new galactic defense network that humanity was establishing. Her ship, the Defiant, would be joined by dozens of others in a fleet dedicated to protecting peaceful worlds from aggressive empires. The network would use humanity's advanced communication systems to respond to threats anywhere in the galaxy within hours. Any world that faces invasion or conquest can send a distress signal. "Through our quantum network," she explained. "Human ships will arrive to defend them, ask for nothing in return except that they treat their own people with dignity and respect." Former Emperor Kethavar was given a choice that surprised everyone present, including himself. President Carter addressed him directly from the podium, her voice firm but not unkind. "You have committed terrible crimes against the peoples of this galaxy," she said. "Billions died because of your empire's hunger for conquest. Justice demands that you face consequences for these actions." The assembly hall fell silent as everyone waited to hear what punishment the humans would impose on the fallen emperor. Many expected execution or permanent imprisonment on some remote world. However, President Carter continued, "We believe in the possibility of redemption. You can choose exile to a world where you will live alone with your memories of what you have done, or you can choose to help us rebuild the Zephyrian people as a peaceful member of the galactic community." Kethavar stood slowly, his crystal form reflecting the light from every window in the great hall. For months he had been expecting death or imprisonment, preparing himself for whatever punishment the humans thought he deserved. The offer of redemption was something he had never considered possible. "I choose to help rebuild," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Perhaps I can find some way to make amends for the suffering I have caused." The former subjects of his empire looked at their old ruler with mixtures of surprise, anger, and something that might have been hope. The healing would take time, perhaps generations, but it could begin. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of New Geneva, looking down at Earth as it turned slowly in space. The planet looked exactly the same as it had before the war, but everything had changed. Humanity had revealed itself to the galaxy not as conquerors but as protectors, and the responsibility that came with that role was enormous. Messages arrived daily from worlds across the galaxy, some asking for protection from aggressive neighbors, others requesting help with natural disasters or technological problems. Humanity was quickly learning that being the galaxy's guardian meant much more than just fighting wars. Dr. Ross joined him at the viewing window, carrying a report about the latest developments in galactic affairs. 3 more species had declared independence from oppressive governments in the past week, inspired by the example of the former Zephyrian territories. "Do you think we're ready for all this responsibility?" she asked. Jake considered the question while watching Earth cities sparkle in the darkness below. Humanity had spent 2 centuries preparing for war, but they had spent much less time preparing for peace. "We'll figure it out as we go," he said finally. "We always have." The age of galactic tyranny was ending, and the age of human protection had begun. It would not be perfect, and there would be challenges that no one could foresee, but for the first time in galactic history, the strong existed to protect the weak rather than to exploit them. The Empire had dared to challenge Earth, and in doing so had changed the destiny of every species in the galaxy.